Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of the Outlaw Nation Show. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, joined as always, not as always, but
not as always.
But joined for these subjects, these topics. I'm joined usually by a man whose intelligence I respect very much, a gentleman who's been my friend for quite a number of years, and of course is also my co-host on the CineFiles. And I'm so honored and excited to welcome him to talk about these comments from Whoopi Goldberg, talk about all the controversy around it, and talk about the idea of race. And that is with the great Steve Morris. How are you, Steve?
I'm good. I'm very good. How are you?
Good. Did you get a haircut? I feel like your hair is shorter from when I last saw you.
I did. I have been, since the pandemic, I have been cutting my own hair. So
Nice.
Knowing I was going to be on camera today, yesterday, I went...
Oh, I thought you could do it like Predator and use the big knife and just go.
Oh, I should have said it that way. Damn.
That's your first TikTok video if you want my you shaving it with the big knife. But thank you all so much for joining us here live. Right now, 23 of you joining us right off the bat. Hopefully those numbers increase because we really want to have a very open and honest and intelligent discussion about these comments made by Whoopi Goldberg on The View this past week. She has been suspended for a couple of weeks as of Tuesday by ABC because of these comments, and we'll give the context and give you the whole background of everything here, and we're going to get into the discussion about them and the reactions that are happening around these comments that have sparked such a strong reaction, for lack of a better term, from a number of sides of the political spectrum, Steve, and some context to these comments as well. I asked Steve a couple of days ago if he'd be willing to jump into this with me, and he said, absolutely, let me take a moment to take a look at these comments. I didn't hear from him for an hour and a half, and then eventually said, yeah, I climbed out of this black hole I went into to talk about these comments. So really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. And ladies and gentlemen, please remember the Streamlabs and Super Chats are open. If you like that we do these kinds of conversations, if you like that we're one of the few shows in this sphere that tackles these tough subjects without being afraid of losing viewers or losing likes or getting in trouble or anything like that, then please support us here. You see the Streamlabs address right in the middle of there on the graphic, rather. It'll be pinned in the chat in just a second. It's in the description of this video as well. Steve, these comments came through here from Whoopi Goldberg on The View. As I stated here at the top of the show, she was talking about the Holocaust. The background of this is the entire View ladies were talking about the fact that this book, Mouse, was being banned, and this other book, To Kill a Mockingbird, was being banned in these states. I think it was Washington and Tennessee, and it sparked a conversation about Mouse, and they were claiming, these people were banning the book, that the sexuality or the nudity in Mouse was the reason they were banning it. Never mind that all the parents probably banning it read all this stuff or read, salacious stuff when they were 15, but God forbid they wanted to ban it. So it opened up a discussion about the Holocaust. And in this discussion about the Holocaust, Whoopi said something initially about being, these are two white groups of people going at each other. That's what it was. And it was kind of passed over. And it wasn't until around the 4-minute mark, and I may be able to play it, we'll see, that she kind of leans into this a little bit more and says that the Holocaust was not about race. It was about man's inhumanity to man. These are two groups of these are two white groups of people. This is white people doing it to white people. So y'all going to fight amongst yourselves. And even when Anna Navarro and Joy Behar tried to correct her that the Holocaust was about race because the Nazis saw the Jews as a subhuman race when they committed these atrocities. And, still now people feel this way who are of the Nazi party and other parties. She kind of steamrolled them and kept saying, no, it's about man's inhumanity. She wouldn't listen, which is ironic considering this whole section of the show was about getting people to see other people's points of views and not limit or restrict people's points of views. She did apologize. We'll get to them in just a second, but I want to get your reactions first, Steve, to when you read these comments, when you heard these comments, and I assume you watched the video, what you thought about these comments as they were happening.
I totally want to answer your question, but can I say something else first?
Of course, I say whatever you like.
Because I think people might be a little bit surprised on what my take on this whole thing is.
Okay, fair
But
enough.
as a Jewish kid growing up when I grew up, I was really indoctrinated, might be too strong a word, but definitely it was in a very much never again learn about the Holocaust, protect the Jewish people sort of philosophy. So I watched films of the Holocaust at maybe much too young an age. I was taught about terrorism in Israel, and that was what I was raised with. And yet, despite that, I don't think I had ever really felt threatened by anti-Semitism my whole life. I was never really afraid of that until recently. And in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a huge rise of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
And with things like Charlottesville and attacks on synagogues, and it's much, much worse in Europe, by the way.
Yeah.
It is really, and it's the first time in my life where I went, man, I actually am a little not scared, but there's a real genuine threat here that what I don't think was there 20 years ago.
Yes.
And so I don't want to in any way minimize the fact that anti-Semitism is real. It's important that we talk about it, and it is scary.
Yeah, let me add just a little bit something here, Steve,
Yeah.
before you go on. Some numbers for people to understand why Steve is saying the things he's saying. This was a report that came out in 2021, in October of 2021, so fairly recently, just 3 or 4 months ago. 1 in 4 American Jews say they have been the targets of anti-Semitism in the last 12 months. Now, remember, this is 2021. Wow. This is only 4 months ago. 4 in 10 American Jews have changed their behavior out of fear. I would say Steve is kind of sliding into that category from what he just said. 4 out of 10 of all Americans have personally witnessed anti-Semitic incidents, and 82% of American Jews say anti-Semitism has risen over the last 5 years, while only 44% of the general public believes that to be the case. So I just want to give a little background on Steve's perspective and point of view here. So go ahead. Sorry, Ben.
No, I'm really glad you made those points. And so I think that puts into context why maybe people's reactions about what Whoopi Goldberg said are strong. I personally, I understand what she was trying to say. Is that she, based on her understanding of race and how we define race today, looked at what happened in the Holocaust and said, oh, well, Jewish people are white people. You know, like when I fill out my forms and they're always, it says, what race are you? Yeah. There's no line that says Jewish. I pick white. That's my race. And so that's what Whoopi Goldberg was saying. And the fact that statement was based in some ignorance about the way the Nazis perceived race. They, and this is one of the big things is the ideas of what race is. We think like this is a locked in thing, that this is obvious. It actually isn't. And it's something that has changed a lot over time. And for the Nazis, they were the Aryan race, and the races like the Slavs, the Romani, which is what we used to call gypsies, and the Jews, those were unclean races. Yeah. And they were definitely according to the Nazis. Yeah. And so from that time, it was 100% absolutely about race. And the thing is Whoopi Goldberg was incorrect. She lacked historical perspective. Yes. She said something that maybe was insensitive, and she apologized.
Yes. And yes. Looking at it from a complete, all the way at the back of the theater point of view, you could argue there is some not validity necessarily, but like Steve said, you could understand why she saw it one way or another. And, this is so funny. Not funny, I guess, but this is so interesting to kind of attach this to some of the anti-Semitism that has been going on, as Steve mentioned, but also some of this desire to whitewash the Holocaust or to forget the Holocaust. Steve and I co-host a show called the CineFiles, and I think both of us can sense the older we get, the less the newer generation wants to go back and watch the old movies, wants to go back and learn about movies from the 1930s, 1940s, 1920s, the late 1800s. They don't want to, they see that as archaic, and they see those philosophies or perspectives or points of views as something that doesn't apply to their world anymore. Never mind that all those films have a lot of the stuff that we are seeing now and we consider to be groundbreaking, they were doing all the way back then. So it's all a matter of recency bias sometimes when people look at this. So the Holocaust now, as we get farther and farther away from the Holocaust, this and more generations come through who start to kind of push these crazy conspiracy theories that the Holocaust never existed, or you get the rise of white supremacy, which tries to deny the Holocaust or say that the Holocaust wasn't as bad, or say, well, look how many Russians died under Stalin, or look how many of these other things died under, or how many, look at Africa and see all the, there are far worse things. They try to deny the importance of the Holocaust. And I was doing a little research for our show today, and I hope I can bring up this fact. According to a nationwide survey of millennials conducted in 2020 and Gen Z people conducted in 2020 by the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, more than 60% of the respondents were unaware that 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust, and nearly half could not name a single Nazi death camp, and more than 10% believe the Jews actually caused the Holocaust. This is the madness that we are dealing with nowadays, which leads to someone like Whoopi, who should have had a bit more perspective, considering she changed her name to a Jewish last name. She considers herself, she said she considers herself Jewish. She changed. So it was fascinating to hear her point of view on this from someone who has kind of or I don't know, taken the Jewish name and taken the Jewish kind of point of view to speak about it like this, you know?
I mean, yes. Well, first of all, to those statistics, you really never lose money underestimating the ignorance or overestimating the ignorance of the American people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so always distressing how little people know about history and where we come from and how many false ideas there are out there. But the fact that how many people believe that it didn't exist, that is an active anti-Semitic movement to erase the Holocaust from human history. And that is why I say, no, it's scary out there. There is scary things going on. And it's interesting too, because it's also linked to I don't know if you know about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Do you know what this is?
Please inform us.
So what the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is that we started here, and this was Henry Ford was a believer in this, and all sorts of anti-Semites, throughout the 20th century, that they had discovered this document, and it was a document of the most powerful Jewish leaders in the world, and it was their conspiracy to take over the planet. And it was that they were going to use banking and the intellectuals and the universities to totally manipulate world governments until Jews ran the world. This is an entirely forged document. It does not exist. I mean, it exists, but it is not real. And there are places all over the world that are still teaching this document. In fact, I had students that were from Saudi Arabia, and when they found out I was Jewish, there was always this huge reaction. And I remember sitting with a student having a one-on-one conference with him, and he said, "I don't understand. You're such a great teacher, and you're my favorite teacher, but you're Jewish." And I was like, "Well, what is that? Why is that a problem?" And then he started saying this stuff about what Jews are, and it was right out of the elders of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It was literally like word for word. And so when you hear things like a conspiracy of bankers or the intelligentsia or the elite, or these words that we hear today, those are out of that same conspiracy theory, and that is still even if they're not saying Jewish, that is still being used as a way to demonize Jews in the world. So this, again, this is a real deal. I think for me, and I don't mean this just for Whoopi Goldberg, but I mean this in general. We have more and more turned down the importance of intent. It doesn't matter what your intent was. If you said this insensitive thing or you did this insensitive thing, that's what we have to deal with. And I think on some level, that's a good thing, because the fact that I didn't intend to insult you, John, doesn't mean that I didn't hurt your feelings. And so I have to reckon with the fact that I hurt your feelings. But you also should be aware, and of course, I hope I didn't hurt your feelings, but you also should be aware it should make a difference that I didn't intend to. Intent does matter. Is Whoopi Goldberg anti-Semitic? I don't think so. I think she made a mistake. I think she said something stupid, and it's like, and so now we're going, well, do we have the right to say stupid stuff? And my feeling is absolutely we do. In fact, I will say that in a weird way, it's good sometimes when people say stupid stuff, because there are more people today that know about the Nazi classification of races than they did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Why do more people know about this? Because Whoopi Goldberg said something stupid.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think is important, and I don't mean this from like I'm a liberal progressive guy. I mean this across the board in general. There needs to be a path of apology. There has to be a way that someone can say, I'm sorry, and it shouldn't have to be the perfect apology.
Right.
It shouldn't have to be, because how often, just in relationships, does the person give you the perfect apology? Yeah, sometimes they don't. And it's like, we have to be able to move on from that. Now, that being said, there are some apologies, like you and I have talked about the Joss Whedon one, where man, that's not, you failed. Like you clear, but if someone is making a genuine attempt to listen and a genuine attempt to apologize and to learn, even if they don't get the whole way, then we should be able to say, okay,
Yeah. And Whoopi went on Stephen Colbert later that night, and explained that as a Black person, she thinks of racism as being based on skin color, but that she realized by everyone's reaction that not everyone sees it that way. I get it. Folks are angry. I accept that. And I did it to myself. And then she apologized again. As Steve was pointing out here, this path to an apology here, I feel like she's done the steps. She apologized, then she issued a statement, which I'll put up on the screen now. She said, on today's show, I said the Holocaust is not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man. I should have said it is about both. As Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League shared, the Holocaust was about the Nazis' systematic annihilation of the Jewish people, who they deemed to be an inferior race. I stand corrected. The Jewish people around the world have always had my support, and that will never waver. I'm sorry for the hurt I have caused. Written with my sincerest apologies, Whoopi Goldberg. So, Steve, I think that's a strong apology. I think it's a well thought out apology. And she's and on the Colbert situation, she was explaining the perspective she was coming from. So I think Steve brings up an excellent point. Would love to hear from some of you all who are listening to us through the Streamlabs and Super Chats. What do you think? Do you think that there has to be a path towards forgiveness and understanding and empathy and apologies here, because we've all said dumb shit at random times or random moments, and we didn't understand how we.
Well, not me,
right? Of course, I apologize. Yes, of course, not Steve Moore, but just about everybody else.
An apology.
Everybody else in the world has said the wrong thing or like not understood how they could be offended, and we're still learning as a society. I think Steve Buck brings up an excellent point. If we're going to learn how to change how we say certain things, whether it's between races, between sexes, between sexual orientations or whatever, there has to be a bit of understanding from the aggrieved party that the other person is trying to make a good faith effort to change or to learn or to understand. Now, if they're not, and it's half-assed, then that's another conversation. But we have to have a little more empathy for the person who says, okay, you know what? I messed up. And Whoopi brought on Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League the next day to talk about all this kind of stuff with him. And then ABC still suspended Whoopi for 2 weeks. So did you agree with the suspension? And we'll get into the reaction from the extreme nutballs on the right. And I don't mean everybody on the right's a nutball. I mean the nutballs that are in the right. What did you think about this suspension? Do you think it was warranted, given the reaction to the comments?
By the way, I was just visually imagining the Venn diagram of left and right with a small section that says nutballs. So you and I have talked off camera and a little bit on camera.
Yes.
I am extremely reluctant to mess with freedom of speech.
Yeah.
Is that, and far more so than most people of my political persuasion,
right,
is that to me, and a lot of what you do in figuring out a political stance is that you have different things you value, and then you have to balance out the value. And for me, as a kid growing up in San Francisco, I went to Berkeley, the home of the free speech movement. Yeah. I grew up on Pryor and Carlin and on all these people that were aggressively going at the establishment and saying things that were offensive, and they were my heroes.
Yeah.
And what their lesson was in order to have free speech, we have to be able to be offensive. We have to offend people. Now who they were going to offend is something we could, obviously talk a lot about.
Right.
And then there's this other thing to balance, which is people's how much people can be harmed and hurt by speech. And you balance those two things. And you go, well, how much offensiveness am I willing to tolerate, knowing it's going to hurt all these people?
Right.
or how much do I protect all these people knowing it's going to limit to some degree speech?
Yeah.
My position, I'm always going to err on the side of free speech. And so that means that, unlike a lot of, that in general, if I see someone on the left shut down because of something they said,
Yeah.
or I see someone on the right shut down because something they said, I have a similar reaction.
Okay.
That is my position, because I think it is a power that should be used extremely sparingly.
Mhm.
And there are times to use it. When someone is talking about violence or hurting people, then yeah, this is the time to shut them down.
Right.
But do people have the right to say stupid, ignorant stuff? And my feeling is, in general, they do.
Right.
So no, I am not for Whoopi being suspended. And I have strong feelings about, just like, I'm not for Colin Kaepernick losing his job.
Mhm.
I'm not for the Dixie Chicks having all their records burnt.
Yeah.
And there are people on the right who I feel the same way about. Like there's, a guy. This isn't even a guy on the right. There's the New York Times. He's a science editor. He's at some meeting, and in discussing issues of race in terms of sociology and science, rather than use the phrase the N-word, he actually said the word in this meeting.
Yeah.
Bunch of people asked for him to be fired from the New York Times. The New York Times at first refused. Now, there's nothing about this guy that was a racist. Nobody said he was a racist.
Right.
He just used this word.
Right.
And the New York Times at first refused to fire him, and then they buckled under and they fired him. It's like, that to me is ridiculous. That like, should he have used that word? No, he did it. He apologized for it. He's not a racist. His intent wasn't racist. There was another one that I read about during the George Floyd protest. There's a nurse, and she's like the head nurse in the hospital. And she was so moved by the protests and what was happening and by George Floyd's death that she wrote a letter to the entire nursing staff that basically said, we have to do better. We have to, make sure, there's been systemic racism within this department. We all have to work to make this better, to make it a more inclusive word, to include, and she wrote Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, and then went on. Well, because she used the phrase all lives matter, and that is a phrase that is associated with the anti-Black Lives Matter movement.
And I imagine she was trying to appeal to both sides of the political spectrum to try to find a bridge here. Yeah.
My understanding from the interview with her, she didn't even know about the All Lives Matter thing. Okay. It was just an ignorance. She just wrote it, and she was fired. Wow. And so it's like, I'm very concerned about the left, and we're all like reacting real fast. Like, I don't like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, you shouldn't, this phrase all lives matter, just so you know, that could be really hurtful, and this is why. And then you go, okay, thank you for informing me.
Well, and I think this is something you bring up that is excellent, Steve. Absolutely excellent. This idea of the cancel reaction, and the cancel call. Now, I think I don't like to call it cancel culture, although I use it in the context of how certain people use it, but it's a consequences culture is what I call it. You and what other people have called it as well, is you say something, you have freedom of speech to say it, but there are consequences to the things you say, and there are sponsors that are to be factored in here. There are private entities that own companies that are factored into these situations, and so the reactions are going to be their reactions of what they see as best for their bottom line. And a number of people are upset that she was suspended for 2 weeks here. I'm trying to bring up the quote from the people over at ABC who suspended her and the reasons behind the suspension, and what have you. And I wish I could find this here. I'm sorry I can't find it right now. But the woman over there at ABC said that it was best for her, Whoopi Goldberg, to take 2 weeks to kind of think about what happened here, kind of explore her ideas about the Holocaust and be in a better position. Oh, here it is. Kim Godwin, president of ABC News. While Whoopi has apologized, I've asked her to take time to reflect and learn about the impact of her comments. The entire ABC News organization stands in solidarity with our Jewish colleagues, friends, family, and community. So this is fascinating because she defended Cosby, no suspension. Meghan McCain, who will never run away from a spotlight, commented on Whoopi's comments the next day. And of course, she said, I don't like to comment about my old place. I've moved on every way possible, but let me tell you about this. And then took these passive aggressive shots at Whoopi. and said that, she accused her of delivering half-assed apologies, and that there needs to be a hot topics explaining, basically trying to eradicate the idea connecting white supremacy to the right. Or anti-Semitism to the right, which is connected to white supremacy. A really ridiculous and fumbling attempt to try to highlight this situation, considering how Stephen Colbert called her out about her anti-Asian comments in the past on a Last Week Tonight segment when she was talking about stopping the Asian hate and hashtagging it. John Oliver, rather, on Last Week Tonight, called her out and had a whole segment pinpointing her anti-Asian. So from the people who are criticizing, there needs to be some perspective about their past transgressions as well, I think, here, in rushing to cancel or throw consequences on somebody as well, and create a path towards understanding rather than destruction, I think.
I think what is so difficult to fight against is that we are in such a world where there are the good guys and the bad guys. And of course, everyone thinks they're on the team of the good guys. And there is such a knee-jerk reaction to attack the other side. And to look for a weakness. I see something that's an inconsistency or a contradiction, and I jump at it. Let's hit that. And I think rather than hey, let's learn from stuff. Let's try to figure out what to do, like that, which is the stuff we should actually be doing. And I think, you'll know the quote better than I do, but before you take what is it out of someone else's life,
look at the speck in your brother's eye, look at the log in your own eye. That's
I think that needs to be your first move. It should always be your first move. Okay, this person said something that really, really offended me. What have I said?
Right.
Am I in a good position? How have I thought about these things? Like if you were, it's like if you were furious. I remember during the Obama era is that there, or during George W. Bush, there were protests against the war, and Fox News said you should never protest against a sitting president at a time of war. That's wrong. Then Obama's president, and they are protesting against Obama and helping people to protest against him. The war's still going on. It's like, well, that is a clear inconsistency. And there are inconsistencies like that on both the left and the right. And that is the stuff that you should look for,
I think my friend Rebecca, who's watching us, thank you, Rebecca. She put a question. She put a question out here. As far as suspension, what is the person's intent? That has to be considered. Rebecca runs her own organization, and certainly this is something that if someone said something that's in public, in an interview, in whatever, she'd have to consider intent. And so it's nice to hear that she does consider that. Whoopi's intent was here more about trying to highlight this idea, and maybe in a way coming from a black perspective, saying, hey, it's two white people going at it, and it's about man's inhumanity to man. So the overall subject that she was, the point of view perspective she was approaching it from was not from the Jews' experience should be diminished. It's more a matter of, hey, this kind of stuff is an example of something that's been happening historically throughout our entire lives and is starting to rise up again in this country and across the world. And how she said it was certainly clumsy and incorrect, and as Steve pointed out, ignorant. But the intention has to be factored in. So I'm surprised that ABC suspended her for 2 weeks. I wonder if this is if this is brought on by them trying to placate the Jewish viewers that they have, Jewish supporters that they have. I know, we've seen both sides of political spectrum really cater to Jewish people to try to get them to vote for them. So we've seen them be a very powerful force, as Latinos are becoming a powerful force, as Black people have been a powerful force in the voting community over the last few years. Certainly Stacey Abrams and what she did in Georgia. So we're seeing this kind of come about here. Do you think that was the intention here? Because as I said, she said these comments about Cosby and wasn't suspended. She said other controversial stuff in the past and wasn't suspended, but this particular thing, was it so egregious, factoring in her intent, that a 2-week suspension was merited? I would say no. It feels like you were saying no, Steve. So what would have been your response to this if you were the head of ABC News and this happened, or programming or whatever, and this happened?
So the first thing I'll say is that all of these corporations are scared.
Yes,
they're all scared. because there is so much power in social media. There's so much power in these uprisings, and they're literally their bottom line stock price will fluctuate depending on how they handle these issues.
Yeah.
So that's why this is such a big deal. No, of course I don't think she should be suspended, because like I said, I think this, take somebody off the air weapon, silence this voice weapon should be used only in the most extreme of circumstances. In general, we should go, and I'll say this, even if she didn't have a good apology, I still don't think she should lose her job. I think this is what America should be about, is I can say, I think what you said is crazy. I don't like what you said. It is ignorant for these reasons. And that's it. That's how it's supposed to work, because we have such a diversity of opinions everywhere. But going back to this idea of intent, I 100% believe intent is important. It's just not the only thing that's important. So I'll give you a personal example. So a friend of ours accused me of mansplaining. She is an absolute expert in her field. She had written an email. I had seen some new facts, and I wrote a different perspective in a response. She wrote me a long email explaining that I had mansplained, wrote what her qualifications were, and that she regularly has been telling her things when she is the expert in the field. So now I didn't feel that I had mansplained. And if you ask my wife and a whole bunch of other people, they're like, no, you just Steve-splained. It had nothing to do with her being a woman. It had to do with me being an arrogant person who likes the sound of my own voice. But what I wrote to her was, and this is absolutely true, is I wrote, I was literally sick to my stomach reading that I did this. I gave her an absolutely honest and heartfelt apology, because regardless of what my intent was, I had hurt her. And I had hurt her in a way that I find particularly disgusting. Which is this idea of mansplaining and disrespecting a woman who is an expert, which she absolutely is, because they are a woman. So the first half of my email, 2-3 paragraphs, was me saying how I had fucked up. And I said, look, and if you would like, I'm happy to apologize, because it was an email thread with 20 people on it. I was like, I'm happy to apologize publicly. I really don't want this, to hurt our friendship in any way. I'm really, really sorry. And after my abject apology, which I'm telling you was really sincere, because I literally was sick to my stomach at the thought that I hurt this person.
I know you do get sick to your stomach when you feel
Then and only then did I say, hey, this is what I was trying to say, and maybe I failed to say it. Because my intent mattered. It just didn't matter first.
And I've found that the smarter path is to ask the questions in response. And that those are things that I've learned, because obviously I'm a passionate guy. I've got strong opinions on things, and I enjoy a robust discussion. But sometimes that can be seen in a certain way. And so I've had to learn over the last 20 years, and certainly with therapy, and certainly having great friends who've been willing to sit down and kind of explain things to me. And thank God I'm a self-aware person and somewhat intelligent to be able to understand that point of view and be like, oh, I get it now. Oh, okay, I see it now. Or, oh, wow, I didn't even think that could be taken that way. And then you go, yeah, you know what? This is not about you. It's about what the other person is feeling with the things you're saying. And, I think we're changing and transitioning in this country, in this world, to try to be more sensitive and understanding, and give people space to express displeasure about stuff that has been going on towards their underserved communities, or our underserved communities, for a number of decades in this world. And so we have to create the space to be understanding of these changes. But yet, yesterday we had the first anti-trans bills about sports signed into law by Kristi Noem in South Dakota. So we see this pushback happening from people who say they're exhausted by being, kind of trying to be schooled about certain things. And it's an ignorance. It's a lazy ignorance, in my opinion, because you want to stay ignorant. I need my ignorance in order to exist. And I think that's where the reaction to a comment is incorrect. Whereas Whoopi's reaction, I feel like, was heartfelt, was truthful. She said, I said something that I feel a responsibility for, not leaving unexamined because my words upset so many people. This was at the beginning of Tuesday's show, which was never my intention. And I understand why now. And for that, I am deeply, deeply grateful, because the information I got was really helpful and helped me understand some different things. Isn't that what we want to hear. And she said further, it is indeed about race, speaking about the Holocaust, because Hitler and the Nazis considered Jews to be an inferior race. Now, words matter, and mine are no exception. I regret my comments. As I said, and I stand corrected. I also stand with the Jewish people, as they know, and y'all know, because I've always done that. So that's a legitimate place of understanding, accepting these kinds of things, and realizing, her point of view or her approach to it wasn't 100% correct in terms of the perspective, right? And she has a right to feel what she wants to feel, but there's a historical accuracy here that was missing in her comments. She identifies as Jewish, adopted her name because of the family heritage. She was born Karen Johnson, and in 1994, she was interviewed by the Orlando Sentinel after the Anti-Defamation League criticized a recipe that she contributed to a charity cookbook for Jewish American princess fried chicken. It was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, she said, but she also realized that's probably what bothers people the most. She said, it's something that I have to be aware of. It's not my problem that people are uncomfortable with the fact that I'm Jewish. So there's certainly been an interesting approach to her Jewishness, for lack of a better term, over the last few decades. And here it comes in this moment. So I wonder, to me, if people are using this situation for the correct reasons, because you want to educate, not destroy, right? This, as we brought up the statistics at the beginning of the show that I was laying out here, Steve, we want to educate people about the situation. We want to bring it out. And Steve made an excellent point that maybe her mistake here can call as a way to walk towards more education on the subject, and not just let's destroy this person.
I think this is a pretty good model of a good apology.
Yeah.
I think she, it's like if we were say, what are the ingredients of a good apology? Well, a sincere desire to learn and an expression that you have learned.
Yeah.
That the apology expresses the mistake that you made,
yes.
that it explains what the mistake that you made was, and shows intent to do better in the future. Like if you only have it's like if you do the, well, I'm really sorry, but honestly, I was totally right. Or you were acting like a dick. That's not really such a good apology.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sorry you feel that way is not really such a good apology. So that's the first thing. The other thing, I think, I'm thinking of two sides. One is, okay, how should Whoopi behave? And I think in general, she behaved pretty well. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't believe someone should have to be absolutely perfect in order to accept their apology. That's the first thing. The other, you're trying, genuinely trying.
Yes.
The other thing I think is to think about, well, how should we behave? And in general, I think just yelling at someone and saying, like, calling someone a racist is not in general a good way to stop people from being a racist.
Right.
Because if you call someone a racist, their reaction is, I'm not a racist and fuck you. Like they don't go, people don't, when you say, you're a racist, people don't go, ooh, maybe I should rethink my approach to racial identity. And, like, that's not what people do. So like, how do we go to someone and say in a way that allows them to change and to learn and not to shut down, because the fact is there's a lot. I mean, I said this to you when we were talking before we got on, but like, there is no such thing as race. It doesn't scientifically exist.
Let's put a pin in that. I want to come back to that, because The Atlantic wrote a fantastic article about this exact thing from Adam Serwer on yesterday that I do want to highlight and connect to Steve's comments on this. But first, I want to get to the Streamlabs and Super Chats that have come in, Steve. This Philip Bryan says, we often judge ourselves by our intent and others by their actions, but we should really flip that and judge ourselves by our actions and others by their intent more often than not. That is fantastic, Philip.
I agree. Yeah, great.
That is an incredible comment, man. Also, dude, you look like you're in fantastic shape. Give me some tips. I'm a little overweight. I'm just letting you know now. But yeah, this is fantastic, Philip. I love that. Mormath Haunts says, I was just going to drop a like, grab Bricky, come back later to watch in its entirety, but this is a great conversation. Oh, thanks, Mormath.
Thank you.
Very kind of you. We got 155 of you all joining us live. So please leave a like on this video. If you're watching it later, and we appreciate it very much that you are watching it later, leave a comment down below and a like as well. We always appreciate that. And we've got some Streamlabs that have come through as well. I am Two Fly Cam says, great show, great content. Keep it up. The breakdown of academia has been a goal of a certain political party for some time. Whoopi kept her boomer card. Whoopi let her boomer card slip out. What do you think about that, Steve? The breakdown of academia has been a goal of a certain political party for some time. Certainly, the underfunding of education, the pushing of these conspiracy theories by a certain side about everything that's going on in this world right now. You can't not look at that and not see there's some validity to that point of view.
There is no question that there is an anti-intellectual strain that generally comes from the right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like and I think it's really troubling. And our last president was the biggest proponent of this.
Yeah.
Because he literally believed that he knew more than doctors and scientists and all sorts of people that study. And it's like, and it's always so interesting to me. It's like, do experts in fields often make mistakes in those fields? Yes, they do. They do make mistakes. First of all, in general, experts and scientists try to learn from their mistakes. That's part of what makes them the experts. And the second thing is their track record is still way better than someone who knows nothing. You know, like to say that someone who is an expert on the Middle East and says one thing's going to happen and they were wrong doesn't mean that, you know, a house painter from Minnesota knows more than they do.
Right.
You know, that house painter knows more about painting houses in Minnesota. You know, and no disrespect to house painters. I know your father was a house painter.
My father was a house painter. Yeah.
Yeah. No disrespect. But, you know, if I needed brain surgery, I probably wouldn't have gone to your father.
No, and nor should you have. No offense to my dad. No, should you have?
Yeah.
You'd want to go.
That's not his area of expertise.
Exactly. Fredtastic 314 says, hey, John and Steve, racism and prejudices happen within the same race and ethnicity all the time. That's for sure. As a Latino, I can tell you that. I am a dark-skinned Latino who's been called the N-word by other Latinos who wanted to put me down. I know the same goes with other ethnicities as well. Yeah, Fred, that goes both ways. Certainly the darker-skinned Latinos go after the white-skinned Latinos or white-passing Latinos. That's been a thing that's come up here as we've seen West Side Story with a lighter Rachel Zegler and a darker Ariana DeBose, as we've seen other Latinas like Alexis Bledel or Juliana Margulies kind of slide under the radar and not really be highlighted for their Latino-ness as strongly by the main pop culture as someone like Selena Gomez. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Selena Gomez or Jennifer Lopez or, oh God, who else am I thinking of that? Anyway, highlighted for their Latino-ness. This is also very, very true. Now, this is not what we're talking about here, but you're absolutely right in terms of the racism within communities, and the Latino racism even extends to a point of xenophobia, where if you're not from this country, then you are somehow lesser than me because I am from this country, or if you're from this continent, I'm better than you because you're from that continent. And so that happens within our community all the time, which is a very frustrating thing. And it happens from what I've had numerous discussions with friends of mine in the Black community, that it happens in that community as well. Does that happen within the Jewish community, Steve? From an ignorant point of view, in my point of view, I don't know. Is that something that, like, the more Orthodox, is there a judgment to the least Orthodox? Is that something that happens within the Jewish community?
This is literally what I was going to say, is there are definitely a whole bunch of people who would not say that I was not Jewish, you know, a whole bunch of people. And it depends on how you define your terms. So I was raised in, you know, there's Orthodox, conservative, and Reformed Jews. I was raised in the most Reformed of the Reformed Jews. So I never learned to speak Hebrew. I don't keep kosher. You know, I mean, I wouldn't do any of that stuff anyway, not about speaking Hebrew, but because I'm also happen to be an athist, which would disqualify me from being Jewish for a lot of people. Judaism's a weird culture / religion because, in my opinion, there's a whole bunch of traits. Yeah. And if you have 4 out of 7 of them or something, you kind of go, well, I'm Jewish, you know? So I have deep historical connection to Judaism, you know, like a deep love of certain Jewish values, like love of education, love of learning, of debate, sense of justice, which comes largely from my Jewish background, but I don't believe in God. and I don't go to temple, and I don't keep kosher. And so there's plenty of people that would say that I'm not Jewish. And I remember I was even having dinner with some good friends, and the woman was Jewish from Israel, keeps kosher, and she, when I said something about being Jewish, she gave me a look, and it was real clear that I'm not a real, and she's a good friend of mine, you know, and that's okay. Like, that's just her, you know, that's where her stance comes
Her
from.
definition.
You know?
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. All right. Haskell 420. What's up, Haskell? He says, hi guys. The usual right wing lies, manipulation, and BS. Bitched about Whoopi, got off easy versus Gina, Roseanne, etc. Conveniently, okay. So he's talking about the right wing, their reaction. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. We'll talk about the race concept here that Steve wanted to bring up, but Haskell is saying, hey guys, the usual right wing lies about manipulation and BS. The usual right wing lies, manipulation, and BS about Whoopi getting off easy versus Gina, Roseanne, Barr, other people conveniently about that those two were warned about their comments repeatedly to stop making them. They refused and got fired. When you work for a company, you represent them. Yeah. Haskell, let's put a pin on that, because I definitely want to circle back and speak about some of the hypocrisy of the right wing going crazy about Gina Carano, Roseanne Barr getting kicked off ABC, and of course Gina Carano kicked off Star Wars, which is owned by Disney, who also owns ABC. So them using this situation to further the political discussion without the perspective of the multiple times both of those ladies said some pretty offensive stuff, or posted offensive, and are still posting offensive stuff. I follow Gina on Instagram just so I can monitor the stuff that she posts. She blocked me on Twitter because I called her out about her pronoun bullshit. But on Instagram, I follow some of this stuff. She's gotten worse and worse about her the conspiracy stuff and all, and she wraps it up with this nice little sweet angel wings bow. But what she's saying is very dangerous, even more dangerous, because of the fact that she presents it in such a sweet, smiley way, which is not a positive and not a good thing to have. So let's circle back to this race thing, Steve. You were just touching on it before we got into the Streamlabs and Super Chats. And ladies and gentlemen, please keep them coming. Hit a like on this video as well. We got 165 of you watching us right now. Please hit a like on this video. Send in Streamlabs, send in Super Chats to support what we're talking about. And Steve, so let's mention what you talked about here. Let's spend some time with it here. You mentioned the idea of race, and I attached it to this Atlantic article from, again, the author here is Adam Serwer. He starts off this article by stating the New York Daily News in the 1930s through Paul Gallico wrote this quote: "The game places talking about basketball. The game places a premium on an alert, scheming mind and flashy trickiness, artful dodging, and general smart aleckness, and not to mention their God-given better balance and speed." And she wrote this about Jewish people being really good at basketball in the 1930s. So, I mean, that's something. There's so much of those words that had coded racism, the artful dodging, the smart aleckness, the trickiness that people have put on the Jewish community for decades. But of course, you could take that and someone could say it incorrectly, as they did in the 1980s with Jimmy the Greek. And even now to speak about how black people are so good at football or basketball or sports or whatever. And it's a way to kind of dismiss them and see them as lesser than, because you're assigning these terrible characteristics and shifty characteristics to people like this. But this is the kind of how much race has changed in our points of views and perspectives. And I talk about this, Steve, because it's something I know you wanted to discuss here during this program.
Well, the first thing I'd say is that this is what we're talking about is a social construct. And there's all sorts of social constructs that we have that are really, really useful. That we believe in all sorts of things that don't exactly exist because they help us to do stuff. So money being the biggest example. Like there's these dots in a computer somewhere that says I have this money, and we just all agree that actually is a real thing, and that lets us do all sorts of stuff. Well, race is also a social construct, you know, and if we did, and so that agreement is really useful, that particular social construct.
Yes.
You and I have in the CineFiles done movies like The Untouchables and The Godfather, where it was very, very clear that Italians and Irish were treated as different races.
Yes.
You know, and we've already talked about this idea that the Nazis divided up races in a way that would seem totally bizarre. Like, for instance, the Chinese and Japanese were called Eastern Aryans.
Yes.
They were also thought of as Aryans. Which is like just such a strange thing to hear, but that made perfect sense to them.
Yes.
Is that if you look at the US, there are 5 races that are recognized by the US government, and they are white, Asian, Black, Native American, and Pacific Islander.
Right.
You notice that your race, Latino, ain't on the list.
Yes.
And it's like these choices, and we look at someone and you see someone who is of African descent, you go, oh, that's a Black person, and that makes perfect sense to us. But these things don't really make sense. We've taken a very few number of traits and then divided up the world into these traits. And it's like genetically, we have a strand of DNA. It has tens of thousands of traits. And what they've done, because now we've mapped the human genome, is there's way more differences within a quote unquote race than there are similarities. There are all sorts of ways in which a white guy from, Scandinavia might have tons of traits in common with a Black guy from South Africa, but we say these guys are different. Well, we're really not, and yet we've put stuff. It's like, you think about, like, there are light-skinned people of African descent and dark-skinned people of African descent. There are people from India with much darker skin than certain people from Africa, and we go like, oh, Asians. And you think of, well, does a guy from India look more like a guy from Japan than he looks like a guy from Saudi Arabia? It's like these categories are so bizarre. And yet we think that we're saying something specific about someone by saying that they are Asian, or saying it's like your experience as a guy of Bolivian descent who grew up in Virginia, joined the army, studied acting, moved to LA, became a podcaster and a YouTube person, is not that similar. Like if there was a John Rocha born at the exact same moment to your parents who stayed in Bolivia, that guy would have an entirely different life experience. And so saying that you're both Latinos with the exact same genetics, what does that say about you? It doesn't say that. It doesn't actually say nearly as much as we think that it does. And yet we still want to divide the world up into these roles and say that it means something. And mostly in general, while the construct of money or laws or marriage or all these social constructs that have a lot of benefits, the social construct of race has been pretty much nothing but terrible in the history of humanity.
We've seen, and can you elaborate on that a little bit more? What do you mean by terrible? Do you mean it's been used by people in power to subjugate, to hurt, to dehumanize people? Please.
Yeah, I mean, like, and again, I don't mean to say, like, if you take great pride in your Latino history, or I take pride in my Jewish history, that's great. I don't want to take that away from anybody.
Right.
That someone embracing their Asianness that's awesome, and that's great.
Yes.
But the thing that you touched on before, a while ago, is in general, we look at our group. We like being a member of our group, and we ascribe the good qualities, whatever they are, to our group. And once we do that, someone who's in another group, well, they must be different.
Yes.
And we can look at them, and it's like, just as someone said about judging people's intent versus judging by their actions, is that we tend to look at the people at our team who do something negative and we minimize that. And then we look at them doing something positive, we maximize that. And then we reverse it when we look at the other team, and we go, oh, see, they did that negative thing. And that becomes, and this is the thing, is that what I really believe, it's funny because, I do the Star Trek podcast. There's an episode of Star Trek coming that I've been thinking so much about. And this is one of the ideas. I actually don't think that Hitler hated Jewish people because they were Jewish. Ooh. And the reason is,
you're going to get us in trouble now. This I got to hear. Okay, go ahead.
Because I don't think Hitler knew anything about what it meant to be a Jew. Did Hitler
know what it was? Jewish?
There are rumors that he has a Jewish grandparent, I believe.
Okay.
But like, does he speak Hebrew? Does he know what a bar mitzvah is like? Does he know what Jewish songs are like or Jewish dancing is like? Does the average Nazi in Germany know very much about Jews? No. What they hate is they hate the story that lives in their mind about what it means to be Jewish.
What they've created in their minds.
What they've manufactured is that which frequently has very little to do with what a Jew is actually like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the same is true. You know, what does the KK hate? Do they hate? They just don't like the color of people's skin. It's not the color of the skin they hate. It's the story they live in that lives in their mind about what it means to be black or what it means to be Jewish, and what that says about who that person is, when largely they are ignorant of who that person is. You know,
fascinating. So okay, so obviously I can't let that go unchallenged, because I do think that he wasn't a stupid man. He was a really he knew how to kind of use the tools at his disposal, his ability to talk and kind of with fervor, and got people in positions of power to further these ideas. He must have had some concept of what it meant to be Jewish. And I mean, most of the foundation of racism is a fear of this race. And yes, you create the stories in your head, but it is about eradicating that race, because you feel that it is powerful enough to stop you. It is powerful enough to control you. And that's where the fear comes from racism. It's, why a lot of white people are afraid of, not a lot, I don't know, numbers. I don't want to argue numbers, but there are to me, the core of white racism towards black people is a fear of being inadequate, right? There's always the conversation about, well, they're more athletic, they've got just they're intelligent, they control, or they become number one in just about everything they go after. I mean, who's your favorite scientist? Neil deGrasse Tyson. Who's your favorite basketball player? Michael Jordan. I mean, Spike Lee, who we're about to do a couple of months on the CineFiles, highlights that Do the Right Thing when Mookie confronts John Turturro's character about his racism and says, your favorite performer is Michael Jackson, your favorite basketball player is Michael Jordan, your favorite golfer is Tiger Woods, like all these things that you have here. And it is a fear that they are somehow inadequate in comparison. Right? There's that racist trope where white men get so afraid that their girlfriends go off with black men because they're going to be seen as inadequate in comparison. And these are the dangerous things that people use race for. I think race is essential in order to create the idea of equality. We must have equality amongst everyone, and that's what we aspire to. The ones who use the designation of race in a terrible way to create anti-Semitism, create white supremacy, that's the danger. That's the stuff that needs to get destroyed. I don't think there's anything wrong with creating race and delineating race in the society. It's a way of allowing more seats at the table for everybody who wants to be represented. It's the danger of using that to promote a dictator, tyrannical approach to a society.
You said so many great things. It's funny. I would never have kind of gone to it's that people feel inadequate. Although I think you've made an excellent argument to that point. I think the fear of blackness in this country is very, very high. In terms of, and in terms of when you go to treatment by the police or you go to other things, you see is that there's just a feeling that is very prevalent throughout this country that people with darker skin are more dangerous on some level than people with lighter skin. And that is not true statistically. It gets into some complicated things, but it is not true. I think the thing that I think holding on and being proud of where you came from and what your culture is, I think that's awesome. I think the issue that I have is that we have arbitrarily made some borders that don't actually make a whole lot of sense. You know what I mean? Like that. And the more we hold on to them, I think the more we can weaponize them. Going back just to the Hitler thing, I've seen some comments in the comments. It's not that I'm saying that there haven't been 2,000 years of persecution of the Jewish people. There have been. And there's been persecution. Some of the motivations were for things that weren't true, like the argument that Jews killed Jesus, is a ridiculous argument. Because he was Jewish and his followers were all Jewish.
Everybody was Jewish at the time.
Did the Pharisees, who were the Jewish leaders, have something to do with his death? Absolutely. Who killed him? Romans. Romans are the people that actually killed him. And yet, because Rome became the center of the Catholic Church, they didn't want that to be the narrative. So they said they put the blame on the Jews. And so there's for thousands of years, there's people that thought this thing that isn't true, the Jews killed Jesus. There's also thousands of years of people thinking that Jews drink blood. and kill babies and all these, all these things that are insane.
Where have I heard that recently? Drinking blood and killing babies. Where have I heard that recently?
I'm telling you, these conspiracies, that's why I brought up the Elders of Zion. Like some of these conspiracies we hear today come from these conspiracies against Jewish people.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like you mentioned, I mean, it's not that, and I'll only say it about Judaism, but it's not that there are things like the fact that Jews are unclean. That's another argument from the Nazi party. That's ridiculous. Like to say that this group of people that values cleanliness really highly, that's what keeping kosher, a big part of it is cleanliness. So that's just an insane thing. Or that they are subhuman. This is what the Nazis would say. Or that they are mentally retarded or evil, like that their brains are naturally more evil. Like all of these things are ridiculous things that have nothing to do with what it actually means to be Jewish.
Yeah.
There are cliches that I say have some piece of truth to them.
Yeah.
Like, and this is obviously an awkward, weird thing to talk about, but it's like, if you were to say, here are two people, which one of them is better with money? And all I know is that one is Jewish and one isn't Jewish. Well, I might bet on the Jewish guy. Now,
Steve said that. I didn't. Steve said
no, I'm a Jewish person saying
Jewish saying that about himself. Yes.
Does that mean that that's always true? Absolutely not. Does that mean there is some truth in a certain cliche? Yeah, maybe there's some truth in a certain cliche.
But again, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
It's like, I mean, like part of it is because Jews really value education. That is a classic cultural thing. If you look at Jewish history, at a time when all of Europe was like 90% illiterate, Jews, in order to become a man, to become a bar mitzvah, you had to read, like study. So you had this Jewish community, which is mostly literate for 1,000 years. Well, what does that do when we get to the 20th century? You have Jews that weren't allowed to own land. They weren't fighting in the wars. They got everything from their brains. So now we get to the 20th century where values are suddenly placed on brain stuff rather than, people are leaving the farms. And so suddenly Jews walked into the 20th century with this huge advantage. That's why I think Jews succeeded so much in the United States, in particular in the 20th century, because it became an area what they had specialized in for 1,000 years.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, again, these are Steve's points of views, but I'm curious to hear and hear this perspective and be educated by this perspective, because I don't know this. That's the first time I'm hearing all of this. I don't know how historically accurate it is. I trust Steve's done a number of research and has his point of view on this. So, but I go back to my point here. This almost, if what you're saying is true, then it reiterates what I said even more so, this idea of feeling inadequate. So
yes, absolutely.
If you're watching Jewish people, and remember what I read earlier, 1930s, they're playing basketball and they're great at it. If you're watching, they can play basketball. They're incredibly literate. They're smart. They're good with money. All these things that they have a kernel of truth in order to push these terrible stereotypes. It is from an inadequate place. It's an anger. It's a frustration from the uneducated, from the not good with money, from the not athletically good, who are mad at seeing a race be good at this. Rather than celebrating and enjoying it, there's a contingent of people that are always going to be angry that they don't measure up. So in order to measure up, they start this anger to destroy this thing because it reminds them of their own inadequacy. It reminds them of how much they don't step up to the plate or can't step up to the plate or don't have the tools to step up to the plate. And rather than blame themselves, rather than blame their parents, rather than blame society, or not society, how can I say this? Rather than blame their, I don't know, whatever, where they're come from, they go after the people who are in power. And we're seeing it happening now. It's happening now, ladies and gentlemen. Anyone who is the attack on people with education, the attacks on Fauci are just, there's no way there's not anti-Semitism behind that. There's no way there's not an anger against education behind that. There's no way there's not, they want to distract from the fact that Trump is the reason why we lost hundreds of thousands of Americans. And there's documents coming out almost daily showing his absolute incompetence in dealing with the COVID situation. So they're going to paint Fauci as the criminal. You got Jesse Waters, someone as irresponsible and stupid as Jesse Waters, literally calling for physical violence on Fauci. Don't tell me that there isn't racism involved there in some way, shape, or form, and political expedience and convenience behind it as well, which are two terrible tools to be combined at the same time going after somebody.
I think again, going back to your point of being inadequate.
Hold on. Hey,
yeah.
he's only had a fucking year. He's only had a fucking year. Okay, Pally, a fucking year. And yes, he's done better. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Your point about being inadequate, like that is definitely post World War I, when the economy collapsed in Germany, and there was a lot of blame put on the Jews for what had happened. You know, and none of it made any sense whatsoever.
Right.
But if you look at somebody and you go, God, why is this guy doing so well and I'm not doing so well? What you probably should do is ask him.
Right. And listen, I got that piece of advice from my friend Christian Harloff. Now, a year or two ago, on a podcast on the top 10, I think, I was frustrated that a couple of friends of mine who are Latino were getting booked consistently to host stuff, and I would have liked to have been considered. I would like to host these things, and I got frustrated and let my emotions come out. And my friend Christian pulled me aside and he said, bro, I get it. I understand. But instead of being upset about it happening, reach out to the people who are in charge of hiring people for those things and go, hey, what can I do to get in your view? What can I do to be considered next time this happens? What can I do to be, I don't know, better at what I do so that you'll consider me for these positions, right? I fell in. So no one's immune to it. I fell into that thing of being jealous of someone who was within my own race, who was doing something that I really wanted to do. And I had to learn that lesson. So what Steve's bringing up is absolutely true.
I mean, we all get jealous. Like we all look at go, why not me? And is there favoritism and is there racism in the world? Absolutely. And sometimes those things are the reasons. You know, I'll give you a personal example is my dad and my father-in-law were very, very different people, and particularly different in terms of money. And so my dad prided himself on finding a penny. That was just joyful for him if he found a penny. And if there was a gutter that was filled with mud and he saw a penny in it, he would grab it and he would be happy about it. And my dad never bought himself a new car his entire life.
Wow.
Never bought himself a new car. Always bought, mostly they were hand-me-down cars from relatives that had gotten too old to drive them. You know, that was how my dad looked at things. He didn't spend a lot of money on himself. And my father-in-law believed that if you had to ask the price of something, that you were being too cheap. So he would say, I wouldn't bend over to pick up a $20 bill. And he was extravagant and he was impulsive. You know, he once said he wanted to buy a car, and I said, so did you test drive it? He's like, no, I never test drive a car. I was like, why don't you test drive the car? He said, because I test drive it, I'll buy it. And I was like, well, that's
wow. Well, at least he knows himself. That's not
and what was funny was he wasn't a big fan of my dad.
Yeah.
They were very, very different. And he kind of made fun of him a few times for my dad being cheap, you know? And I went, oh, this is part of why people end up hating the Jews, particularly because my father-in-law lost at least 2 fortunes and maybe 3 and my dad didn't, you know, and because my dad was really, really careful with his money. And my father-in-law really wasn't, you know, and so he could easily look at my dad and be pissed off at him,
right?
You know, for the behaviors that allowed my dad to hold on to his money, you know.
That's fair. Lori Brown called me out here. Lori Brown, valid. She said, just tuned in. First time F word used over and over. Really? Yes, Lori, I apologize. But we've been going for over an hour, and someone brought up a perspective here that I wasn't happy with. And guess what? That person has now subscribed to my channel because he loves the passion with which I use the F word with him and describe it. And I appreciate that. One and only. He says, Trump has less than a year during COVID. Biden has had over a year. You're right, but Trump had it at the beginning and could have stopped so many more things at the beginning than Biden coming in after all these hundreds of thousands of deaths and trying to do better. And it's very tough to do better when you have a large number of people in the country who are invested in promoting anti-vaccine conspiracy theories, promoting anti-COVID conspiracy theories, claiming it's not real, and all of a sudden realizing it's real when they're dying from it in the hospital. A number of right-wing talk show hosts have died from COVID because they weren't vaccinated and have issued comments while they were there in the hospital saying they should have gotten vaccinated. So it's a very tough thing when you have news networks that are invested in keeping people ignorant and scared about the vaccines. When you have idiots like Aaron Rodgers who are prominently placed in the NFL promoting nonsense like they've done their own research about the vaccines and about this kind of stuff. So Biden has inherited a completely fractured situation here with a large contingent of people who do not want to go along with what's going to be best for our society so that we can get to a herd immunity place and go back to functioning in a normal way. They'd rather dial into the political side of this that paints Democrats as the villains. So they're invested in doing that rather than saving lives. And that is a horrible, horrible thing to see in our world and in our country. So just saying there. All right. Let's sorry, I'm going to take that down. Thank you, one and only, for subscribing. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I'd really appreciate you doing that too. Subscribe down below. We're called the Outlaw Nation for a reason. Yes, yes, I'll review Jackass Forever and have some fun with that. We'll talk pro wrestling, we'll talk sports, and we'll talk entertainment, TV, and film, but we also talk the hard subjects. I'm never afraid to talk about a hard subject, never afraid to dive into stuff. And I'm very blessed and grateful that I have intelligent friends like Steve Morris, like Michael Vogel, like Shannon McClung, like Wendy Lee, like other people Laura Kelly, people co-host shows with me on this channel who are intelligent that I can go to and have conversations with about stuff like this. So thank you. So please subscribe down below and hit that bell button so when we release our stuff. And Steve, I've made an active decision, and I've talked it over with Steve, and Steve's been very gracious to accept this thing, that I want to have Steve more part of the rotation of people I'm bringing on to the Outlaw Nation for a number of reasons, but also to promote our CineFiles podcast that is out there for y'all to listen to, where we dive into films and explore it. And this weekend, we're going live on our own CineFiles YouTube channel talking about Iron Man 2 and The Incredible Hulk as we kind of address Marvel stuff now as it's happening. It's been our goal here on the CineFiles in 2022 to start covering more of these Marvel movies that are past the 10-year mark on their anniversaries of release. So there we go.
Can I see something on the COVID thing?
Yeah.
First of all, I see in the chat that the one and only that that your wife passed away from COVID, and I just wanted to say,
I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Really sorry for your loss, and
My
that's
sympathies
just
as well.
Yeah, terrible. I think there have been a lot of mistakes, including mistakes made by the Biden administration. I think what's been so tragic is there was ways that COVID could have brought us together.
Yeah.
And instead it was politically and consciously used to bring us apart.
Yeah.
And I think, it's like, I think things like admitting mistakes is so important to science in terms of, okay, this is what we thought at this time, and now we think this, and this is what's changed, and this is what the new data says. But because of political reasons, particularly Donald Trump, on both sides, there's been a reluctance to kind of have the facts. Like, so for instance, Donald Trump denying the severity of the disease, refusing to wear masks, and trying to continually minimize it and then framing those things as political is a big part of what put us where we are. Now, I still think hundreds of thousands of people in the US would probably have died regardless, but I think maybe twice as many have died unnecessarily because of some of these decisions. I also think that we still haven't gotten to the point where we just go, okay, what is the acceptable level of risk? And then make our choices based on that. The choices have become political in terms of left people saying wear a mask, social, stay inside, shut things down, and people on the right say no masks, some saying no vaccines, which is absolutely ridiculous and insane, and just go out and do stuff. And you people on the left are sheeple. This is not the way to deal with a pandemic. Like, we should be just going like, okay, what are the facts? What are the levels of risk? What level of risks are we comfortable with? And then make your decisions based on that.
But we go back to this thing that we started the show with, this idea of perspective, right, Steve? This idea of looking at the speck in your brother's eye before looking at the log in your own. How many of these people who are conspiracy theorists, or go after Fauci, or go after Biden, or the CDC or whatever, and somehow leave Trump out of the blame? How many of these people are professionals in their fields and have made mistakes? in as educated as they may be in their particular fields and their jobs, but somehow or had to reverse policy because some other things popped up, or had to troubleshoot a situation because an unexpected X factor came into the equation. How many of those people have had to do that in their own prospective careers, and yet they don't bring that understanding to Fauci, to the CDC, and the changes that are going on here? And I find that to be such an irresponsible thing, because now you're just conveniently removing your own experience from this experience. And I think that's a mistake as well. Understanding that science is not perfect, that doesn't mean you can't listen to it or you shouldn't listen to it. Religion has changed over the years. As we've talked about here with the Atlantic article, and Steve saying the idea of race has changed over the years. The Bible has been rewritten a number of times, according to many biblical scholars. So this idea of things being the Constitution has had amendments, irregardless of Lauren Boebert's ignorance of the history of the Constitution, which came out yesterday and today. The Constitution has been rewritten a number of times by adding the amendments, which the founding fathers knew weren't necessary. You know why? Because they were educated men and understood that this is a document that it's not just locked in stone. It will change as society changes, as technology changes, as people change. The points of views will change. So therefore, different things have to be in perspective. And so those things that we need to create more understanding and more empathy for these kinds of mistakes, or something like Whoopi Goldberg making her comments here from an ignorant point of view, and allow people to be educated, have a little bit of grace here. If the intention is to be educated, if the intention is just to create division and create likes and clicks, like people like Ben Shapiro and Jack Posobiec, who live off, or even Carano, who live off, angering people, and fomenting hate and division and what have you, that's where the danger lies. And this is not what happened here in this situation with Whoopi Goldberg. She clearly said something wrong. She was willing to be educated. And Claudia Dolph, my friend, correctly said, went on Colbert and doubled down, which was a big mistake. Then on Tuesday, really had to kind of backtrack and apologize, and had Jonathan Greenblatt on. And so did all the necessary steps to show that this was a mistake. She wasn't obstinate or stubborn about it. Within the 24-hour, she wanted to create a space for understanding and education for herself.
So I think we have such a strange view of what mistakes mean. Years and years ago, I listened to an interview, and in the interview, they're talking about the universe there were two religious people, like a priest and a minister of some kind, and then there was a couple of scientists. And in my brain, as the thing started, I'm like, well, scientists deal with facts and numbers and math, and religious people deal with faith and ideas. And so my expectation was the scientists would say things that were really solid, and the religious people would say things that were more ethereal. And it was exactly the opposite, is that the scientists, whenever they were asked a question, they said, well, we don't know exactly about this, and this is what we think might be true about this, but we need more experimental data. Everything they said was couched in sort of limitations. And the religious people were 100% sure about what they were saying. And the thing to me is the fact that the scientists were unsure and questioning things. That's why you can trust them. And I'm not saying that you can't trust religious people. That's not my point at all. Is that Donald Trump believed, his philosophy is that I can never show that I've made a mistake. Ever. And
there are people who subscribe to that philosophy too, which is
so there are a lot of people that listen to him and go, he's never made a mistake. Therefore, I can trust him. Whereas Fauci has made mistakes. Like we put too much trust in cloth masks. And that now the data is very, very clear that cloth masks are help, but they aren't nearly so effective as a surgical mask or an N95 or something like that. Well, that's what science does, is they go, here's what I think. And then you run the experiment, and then you look at the data, and then you change what you think. And the fact that the willingness to change and to learn from mistakes and admit mistakes, that should be what makes you trust somebody. Not someone who says, I'm always right. That's not trustworthy.
I don't trust anybody who thinks they're always right. Even Steve Morris, who thinks so.
Exactly.
I don't 100% trust him, so I love
You shouldn't.
this. Philip Bryan very kindly says, one of the best shows you've ever had, Rocha, and I've been listening since your day one on Collider. This has been great. Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Philip.
As I said, it is because I have fantastic people who are willing to come onto the show and educate us on their points of views and perspectives. I'm very blessed and lucky to have that on this show. I want to hit these Streamlabs and Super Chats, Steve. Before we wrap up here, we should wrap up because we got to jump on and do a Star Trek show. Mormouth House says, I play a game I call Dumbass or Asshole. It's just ignorance versus uncaring. I like that game. That's a fair game.
Who wins?
Yeah, who wins? Exactly. Also, Rebecca brought up a really great point. She said, I am white. I was raised Baptist and told I was Jewish. My grandmother was Jewish. Her family was Jewish. My cousins are black. They practice Judaism. Who do you consider Jewish? We say we all are. Absolutely. Yes.
I'm all for it.
Yeah. If you identify with that, absolutely. This Philip Bryan came on and said, spot on. Combo of ignorance and arrogance is astoundingly dangerous, for sure. P.S. Cycling is my activity. Keep my 47-year-old me somewhat fit. Love this conversation, gentlemen. All right. Shout out to you. Philip, I bought a bike. I bought a bike 4 months ago. Let's be honest. I bought it 6 months ago. I haven't ridden it yet. It's a fantastic bike, top of the line bike. And yet I haven't convinced myself to get on it because I'm so heavy now. I'm scared I'm going to have a heart attack while I'm working out. I don't know what's happened to me. I used to work out 4 or 5 times a week. Now I haven't done it in 5 years consistently, and I'm scared. But thank you, Philip, for the encouragement. I will get on that damn bike. Simon says, no nation or religion is homogenous. All groups may contain murderers and thieves, as well as upstanding citizens and great philosophers. Easy to give in to prejudice when one deals with negative elements, and put up a peace sign. Yeah. Steve, thoughts on that?
Yes, there are negative elements in every group.
Yeah.
That's and there are amazing things in every group. And the idea, like, here, I'll put this out there too. It's going to sound really weird, but even if race did mean something, and we could say there's certain traits, intellectual, moral, talent that we could have expectations about within that race, there would still be a massive bell curve, So that would mean, so even if you could say that this race was a little bit smarter or a little bit dumber or a little bit stronger or a little whatever, or a little bit more evil or a little bit more good, it would still be a whole range of people within that group. So that still doesn't mean that you could say anything about the individual. Yeah, because these groups are incredibly diverse. Yeah. And the fact is, there is nothing that says that anything like that about any of these groups. Yeah. So just accept that that people in general are people. Yeah. That's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's see. I am Two Fly Cam says, great conversation. Appreciate hearing the voice of others on complex subjects like this. Thank you both for speaking on it. Please keep the long formats coming. I need it for work. I appreciate that. I am Two Fly Cam, but I get the comments from both sides. People are like, do shorter content, do shorter limited content, 8 minutes videos, 10-minute videos. And then other people are like, give me an hour and a half, 2 hours. I love that. So I got to find that balance, and I'm still trying to find that balance. And thank God I'm still picking up subscribers. Thank God people are still on the Outlaw Nation trying to believe in it, and we keep pushing it forward. So I'm going to find that combo. Trust me on this. And this is kind of maybe a little bit of a test drive, to be honest with you, because the Good People Association isn't doing their morning shows anymore. SCN Live isn't doing this unless they're behind the paywall. So there is a gap here. And so there may be something where I want to explore having shows like this in the mornings, not every day, but certainly maybe twice or 3 times a week. And we'll see if I can make that happen. But I appreciate that. I am Two Fly Cam. You're very kind. M. Jund says, as a Jewish person, I fear Whoopi's suspension will do more harm than good. It reinforces the baseless conspiracy that Jews control everything. That's an excellent point. It's ignorant and absurd, but it feeds those people. Yes, Steve, that's something we didn't highlight yet on the suspension. Can we talk about this before we wrap up here? Yeah. What do you think of M. Jones' comments, which I think are very brilliantly stated here?
I think she's right. And this is why, just even beyond the Jewish thing, I think that's absolutely true, by the way. Particularly Jews run Hollywood and Jews run these networks and all that stuff. It just reinforces that stuff. Yeah. I think in general, this is why I'm so reluctant to silence people or to say people should be silenced, because I think it tends to backfire. I think it just hands weapons to the other side to say, hey, look at those people and how intolerant they are. or that they're hypocritical. And I don't want to hand the other side that weapon.
That's fair. But by the same token, you have to do something. And so, you wonder if the suspension, maybe 2 weeks is too long, maybe a week, maybe the rest of the week would have been a better situation. Maybe she could have taken a pre-planned vacation like all the Fox News people do when the heat gets too hot. It was scheduled already. Which I love that showing up in the Book of Boba Fett.
I mean, I was just going to say, I think it's the Martin Luther King quote that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Yeah. I think the answer to ignorance is not silence. The answer to ignorance is truth.
Right. Yes, exactly. You bring up an excellent point here. Why one and only, just to wrap up, why was Roseanne Barr fired for a few comments? The comments were repetitive and consistent, and it had been happening over years. And I think that's why that situation went the way it went. With Whoopi, she's left leaning. It's a little more about understanding, a little more about speaking about the equality of all. And so it's a different point of view, different perspective here. Whereas Roseanne was constantly, just like Gina Carano, it wasn't just the one Holocaust comment. It had been building. She had been warned, as Edward Askell pointed out in the Streamlabs. Both Roseanne and Gina were given multiple opportunities to walk back their comments, to step back from leaving those posts, to not knowing that their jobs were in danger. I think Roseanne had hubris, thinking, you can't have a Roseanne show without me. Well, they did the Connors, so they certainly could have a show without you, and she got taught that lesson for sure. And on the other side, Gina Carano has been using this to promote herself. But look, she went from doing a Star Wars show to now being in a film about Hunter Biden. That's sad. That's a fall from grace for sure. And so those are the things. So I'm sure what the suspension is about, hey, let's take Whoopi off the air because we don't have a lot of controversy around The View, even though they do tackle controversial subjects. Let's let her take a little bit of space, learn some stuff. And then when she comes back, then we have a more educated conversation about this situation. So perhaps that's the point of view. But I think 2 weeks is a bit long. I think a week would have been more than enough for that, to revisit that and have an educated conversation about it. So that's my own 2 cents on this.
Can I say what I think they should have done? So we know we had someone from the Anti-Defamation League come on The View. Yes, I think you don't suspend her. I think you say next week is about the Holocaust.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would have been brilliant. And ironically, something Meghan McCain said. She said we should talk about this subject on the hot topics on The View. She's not on The View anymore, obviously, but she was suggesting that. And I think your way of putting it is much better, where they spend the whole week having segments about it, so you educate people about it. But Steve, you and I both know people get weird about those hot button issues when they just want to wake up and have coffee in the morning. Then again, we had almost 175 people joining us this morning for this discussion. So obviously there is a market for it. That's for sure. And
I'm not the Views audience. I don't watch The Views. So and you were talking about whether you're going to do long form or short form things. Yeah. You know which side. You don't need me to help you make things shorter. That's not really my strong suit.
I know. Steve said to me last night when I told him about this, he said, "Oh no, we won't do more than an hour. I don't want to talk about this more. We're 90 minutes." And I knew we'd go 90 minutes. I know. Steve, ladies and gentlemen. And I know myself. All right, let's wrap up there because as I said, we got to jump on a Star Trek, going to be on Enterprise Incidents, which I'm looking forward to. And we're about to record it. Steve, thank you, brother, so much. It's, outside of the CineFiles, it's great to have conversations like this with you. Although I love our conversations on the CineFiles, this is fun. This is essentially an offshoot of our friendship and our conversations that we've had on numerous occasions. So thank you very much for taking the time this morning, because I know you're a busy man as well. Please let people know where they can find you and everything that's going on, my man.
Well, first of all, thank you, because I've had the opportunity that you've given me to be able to speak my mind on these topics when I've been building and busting with these thoughts, and the fact that you've given me an outlet, I really do appreciate. As you can see right below me, you can reach me at SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. You can listen to the CineFiles, which we're about to do our live show on the Incredible Hulk and Iron Man 2. Yes. Following that up with more of the Last Picture Show, fascinating film from the 70s, and then probably 2 months on Spike Lee. I have a feeling Issues of Race will be coming up there too. Yeah. And John is coming on to record Enterprise Incidents on Journey to Babel. We're going through the original series and we're halfway through season 2.
Yeah, and we're going to argue about the pronunciation. Is it Babel or Babel? We're going to argue about that for half an hour at least. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Appreciate you all madly. Marmathan says, you guys are helping me put off laundry. Okay, good. Don't blame us. Don't blame us if you're wearing day-old underwear. I don't want to hear it. It's not our fault. You allowed yourself to get distracted by us, but we appreciate you listening. Thank you all so much. Please, as I said, remember, hit a like on this video. I think we're about to cross 100 likes. Would like everybody who's listening right now, hit a like button. If you're watching it later, hit the like button, please. It's so important. Likes and comments. If you're watching later, leave a comment. They elevate the visibility of the show and this channel on YouTube for the algorithm. So please do that. We appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel as well, you enjoyed our content, this is kind of content you can find here on this channel. Click that subscribe button down below and hit that bell button so you see when we're dropping all the content we do. Follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and Instagram and on TikTok. I will be doing stuff on TikTok for sure. And you can follow me, The Outlaw Nation, on Twitch. Going to be doing a Super Bowl watch along. Certainly next Sunday, we were doing the NFC and AFC championships. And later on today on Twitch, live at 3 p.m., the John and Wendy show, our new episode there at 3 p.m. PT. Later on, look for a new episode of the Geek Buddies. Tomorrow, we're dropping our spoiler review of the last episode of Boba Fett with Laura Kelly as well. So look for all that happening this weekend. And don't forget, as Steve said, 4 p.m. PT on the CineFiles YouTube channel. That's CineFiles on the CineFiles YouTube channel, 4 p.m. PT live. Join us for a conversation about Iron Man 2 and the Hulk. All right. Thank you all so much. Much love to you all. We'll talk to you next time with another brand new episode here from the Outlaw Nation. Have a great rest of your day.